Hey everyone, Freddie Michaels from The Harder Critic, where we do not so deep dives into movies. Today we have the 1960 juggernaut in the first installment of 31 Days of Horror, which is none other than Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho. But before we get into the overall synopsis, review, and rating, please like, share, and subscribe, hit the notification bell, and let's get into it. You want to watch a movie that stands the test of time? Well, Psycho is that movie. Not only did this movie change cinema and the moviegoer experience, it's the most influential horror movie you ever seen. And if you haven't seen it, you have witnessed its influence whether you knew it or not. The marketing for this movie was probably the first spoiler-free marketing ever, and it was heavily implied by Hitchcock himself that viewers experience this film nose to tail and not be so laissez-faire, even turning people away for late admission. God, I wish this was still a thing. Anyway, this movie's success gave the keys to directors after it to dive into the genre further, allowing them free range to play on much darker elements. The movie also grandfathered matching sound with horror by using the iconic score from Bernard Herrmann, and even down to the forever changing plot as the big bad is established. Whenever I discuss this movie with friends, I always mention that it's 3 movies in one while being a full course on psychology at the same time. I hardly ever mention the actual scare factor of the film because what's more crippling than the shock value of the slasher is the depth of implication it provides. The auxiliary story that this movie is telling is equally, if not more interesting than what's being displayed on screen. The movie begins with Marion Crane, played by Janet Leigh, talking to her entangled lover Sam. She's the side bitch, about getting away and Amscrane out of town together. She's then tasked with depositing $40,000 into a client's account at her job, but instead steals the money and goes on the lam to reunite with Sam. The paranoia displayed throughout the first half of the film, the guilt and almost orgasmic feeling of getting away with crime, is perfectly executed by Janet. And while it isn't quite a horror movie yet, the psychological thriller elements are, in my opinion, at their best in the first leg of the movie. Her acting as she wakes up on the side of the road by the highway patrol officer that shows how plagued she was by what she's done. So much so, to the point where everyone she speaks with, there's a sense of they're already onto her. You mix that with the imagery in the film and actuality and realness of implications, wouldn't it be scary for any woman to be woken up by a stranger on the highway in the middle of the road? Is having that amount of cash on hand safe for anyone? What if anyone finds out that she's loaded with cash? She'd be a perfect target to any predator along the way. These underlining elements force you to ask these kind of questions, as she ditches the car for a newer one and is eventually forced off the road by the natural elements of a downpour where she's destined to meet with her karmic debt. A gothic manor that sits on the hill with a senile disciplinarian howling about the night, and the dark and eerily miskept small motor inn by the name of Bates Motel. The keep of this place, Norman Bates, played by Anthony Perkins, eventually comes down to greet the guests after tending to his mother, and we embark on a 20-minute masterclass of character development, writing, psychology, emotional warfare, and the epitome of the horror genre iconography. I'm not using hyperbole when I say every single word spoken within this scene between the two main characters is imperative to breaking down its genius. There's so many subtle nuances that Norman meant Janet no harm, from telling her to take the hotel merchandise back to brag to friends later on, to even mentioning that she's only 15 miles from Fairville, which she surely could have soldiered on that short distance through the storm, as shown by her expression with this finding, to even the way that Norman leans back and forth in and out of the light and dark room. Every single thing in this movie, from the 23-minute mark to the 50-minute mark, is not just the shift from a thriller to a pure psychological horror movie, or rule-breaking iconography that pushes an entire generation of filmmakers to come. It's also a form of symbolism to deep dive into the psychosis of a killer with DID that welcomes you in with his hometown charm and sincerity. And even the shocking moral compass as stated when he shares with Janet that he can never stuff dogs or cats but prefers more passive animals. Taxidermy is not just a hobby, it's more of a lifestyle and a euphemism for Norman to describe his way of killing. It's in this scene where the two have their last supper that we as the viewers begin to feel that the money no longer matters and that something much worse is afoot. And with each question asked by Norman, where are you going? And what are you running away from? Norman's childlike mother-boy nature starts to show his man-like stature. He leads the first half of the conversation showing interest, asking questions, and keeping communication going. It isn't until Marion inserts her own thoughts that they intercept Norman's mental fortitude, and she witnesses a change. We get an exposition on how his mother raised him after the death of his father and that she's fallen mentally ill, but not before a sickened chuckle as he mentions the death of her second husband, who she loved even more. This way of deepening the story through realistic exposition as the two main characters are just getting to know each other is outstanding, truly the best dialogue and imagery in the film, while allowing world building for prequels and subseries around it. I also love how Norman explains his attachment to Mother and how he can't leave her even if he wanted to before aggressively detailing the inside of an insane asylum. We really get the sense that he's been in one before, and as he's playing mental tug-of-war with himself, he says she needs me, which eventually gives Marion a sympathetic moment of clarity where she wishes to return the stolen money. She then tells Norman a different last name than the one given on the registry before heading off to bed. We get an entire code switch from Norman as he surveys her from inside the office and makes his way back to the manor. We then get the classic shower scene where Mother approaches Marion, towering over her, and viciously stabs her to death from behind the sheer curtain. Now, if it isn't obvious enough that Norman is actually Mother, the next scene where he hides the body as if he's done this 100 times, or the sadistic and only poor acting in the movie, purposely albeit, where he says, "Oh God, Mother, blood, blood," will certainly convince you. I can't stress enough how many movies pull from Psycho, specifically with this move of killing the lead midway through the film. Now, as the movie enters its third act, we're brought back to Sam, who's just for the streets, and also introduced to Marion's sister, Lila, played by Vera Miles. The two are approached by a private investigator who's been hired by the man Marion stole from, and as his trail runs cold, he arrives at the Bates Motel in a last-ditch effort. As this guy Arbogast questions Norman, he enters the manor but is killed by Mother in a very visually dated display. And though the actual kill looks silly, some of the shots and angles in this scene are the best in the film. And the display of range by Anthony Perkins is masterful. I love how Norman is such a different person than the timid and vulnerable man-child he was with Marion. He's much more charismatic and masculine around other men. So after the killing and dispatching of Arbogast, Sam and Lila eventually make their way to the Bates Motel, because a plot has to happen, right? And as the two look for answers, Sam distracts Norman, which allows Lila to break into his manor, which is illegal, just a family full of thieves and criminals at this point. After going room to room discovering no sign of Mother, we're brought back to Norman, who knocks out Sam after realizing Lila's been gone too long. She enters the cellar to discover a skeletonized body sitting in the chair and lets out a scream that immediately gives away her location, in which we see the only real chilling scene of the movie, Norman in full drag with a knife and a psychotic smile draped across his face. I love how as Sam undresses Norman, it's almost like he loses his power as a killer. We get the best and worst parts of the film as it concludes, in my opinion, with an over-explanation of DID and how Norman committed matricide. I hate to oversimplify this particular part, but it just felt overly detailed for some reason that should have been left to interpretation. But with this scene, we're offered to look into the camera as Norman's personalities merge into one another and Mother takes full control. The smile is so iconic. I prefer Mother's monologue way more than the Doctor's, mainly because the depth and meaning behind Norman's psychosis, that alone can and already is a YouTube video in itself. The movie ends with the tow chains pulling the car out of the mud, bringing that innocent woman back into the fray. Kind of like a little old mother who wouldn't hurt a fly. So, what are the pros? The movie is truly addictive. You watch it over and over, studying the writing and wishing to chase the first high of watching it for the first time. It's more than just a horror movie, it's a rule-breaking character study that beats the odds, even eclipsing its own inspiration of the terrible serial killer Ed Gein and Robert Bloch's book Psycho. Norman Bates himself, honestly, I could do a whole video on just about how awesome and realistic this character is. He's disarming with his charm and dangerously common. It's like a predator in the wild that you want to pet, but will kill you. And I love little to no explanation, which allows the movie to feel organic and flow. You feel just as lost as the characters in the film watching it for the first time. Also, the marketing in the film adds so much allure and grandeur. The rollout showed the importance to cinema and the value of the viewer. It stays true to the horror genre while giving you a roller coaster of a thriller in the first half. While watching it, you can truly imagine what this movie must have felt like for the viewers then. The impact lands even still, and while there's no real gore outside of Mother, it still puts jump scares and exploitation on the main screen. And lastly, Psycho succeeds at all three stories in the film: the paranoid woman on the run, the secret of the Bates Motel, Norman, and the conclusion of Mother. So, what are the cons in this masterpiece? Time. To put it simply, time is the only con this film has. The movie is in a peculiar period where the time in which it was filmed, they couldn't really display horror properly, which makes the jump scares pull away from the actual gore or horror and often feel dated. If you recently watched Terrifier as of late, then go back to this film, it would feel like watching a PG-13 movie. And while I could add the over-explanation of Norman's condition at the end, I don't believe it was unnecessary because of the times. People needed that spoon-feeding because there was nothing like this film before it. And if you're anything like me and watch an unhealthy amount of serial killer documentaries to go to bed at night, then this film is the one for you. If you're looking for a horror movie that set the tone for the beloved genre, then this film is for you. If you like complex characters that are perfectly executed and a plot that has enough depth to have sequels and a TV show made from it, then this movie is for you. Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho is the blueprint for my favorite genre and simply one of the best films ever made. You'd be crazy to think it's not a 10 out of 10. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Leave a comment of what you thought about the video or any movie you would like to see me review next. As always, be well, and I'll see you soon.